My name is Wendell Hoffman. I am 68 years old. At my own company's 25th anniversary gala, my son poured a glass of red wine over my head in front of 250 guests and told me people who don't know their place don't deserve to stand beside successful people. His wife laughed and said at least now I looked like a real server. Neither of them knew the wine-soaked envelope inside my jacket held documents transferring 40% ownership of a billion-dollar company, $640 million, directly to him. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you are listening from. Now let me take you back to a pickup truck, 2 shovels, and a woman named Opal, who built this company beside me before either of us ever imagined this night. Opal and I started Hoffman Infrastructure Group in 1987 with a pickup truck, 2 shovels, and a contract digging foundation trenches in Schaumburg. We mortgaged our first home to make payroll for 12 workers. When a client delayed payment, she negotiated our very first contract 8 months pregnant because the client would not take me seriously. Alone, she kept the books, managed payroll, and personally called every worker's family when someone got injured on a site, making sure they had what they needed. She died 6 years ago. Cancer. I still wear the navy blazer she bought me in 2003 to every important meeting, because she used to say, a real man does not need clothes to speak for him. I raised our son Conrad, believing he had absorbed that same integrity, riding beside me in the truck on Saturdays, asking about concrete and rebar. Conrad became CEO a decade ago. His wife Simone runs corporate communications, a woman with practiced grace who cultivates wealthy investors, and, I would learn that very night, had spent 3 years quietly rewriting company history without either of them ever telling me directly what that meant. I arrived at the gala that November evening with a signed manila envelope pressed against my chest. 40% ownership of everything Opal and I had built, ready to hand my son as an unconditional gift. At the entrance, a young security guard I recognized from a previous event asked if I was catering staff, mistaking the founder of the company being celebrated for kitchen help. Inside, every banner and photograph along the walls, decades of projects I had personally overseen, had been carefully edited. My face was gone from every image, cropped out systematically, not carelessly at the family table reserved for founders. My name placard was missing entirely. A seating coordinator informed me I had been placed at table 14, near the kitchen, in the shadows, while Conrad and Simone sat centered, beneath the spotlight. The anniversary presentation, on the overhead screens, began the company's timeline in 2014, the exact year Conrad became CEO, erasing 27 years of history. Our first municipal contract, our growth to 400 employees, every milestone reassigned to make. My son, appear self-made. Opal's face never once appeared. Then I heard Simone's voice behind my chair, introducing me to an investor as one of our site workers from the early days. Not founder, not family. That's the exact phrase people use once they have decided your entire life's work is simply inconvenient to acknowledge. I sat quietly at table 14 holding that envelope, watching my longtime friend and Chief Operating Officer, Burton Castellano, catch my eye from across the room, a small nod of acknowledgement that told me he understood exactly where I had been seated and exactly what it meant. Burton had been with me since 1992, back when the company was still just myself, Opal, and 8 workers. As Conrad took the stage to thunderous applause, introduced as the visionary founder and CEO, I felt the weight of that envelope shift on my lap. $640 million, still undecided, still mine to withhold. Then Conrad, mid-speech, spotted me in the shadows near the kitchen and, rather than acknowledge me warmly in front of the crowd, crossed the room with a glass of red wine still in his hand, his face arranging into something cold I had never seen directed at me before. People who don't know their place don't deserve to stand beside successful people, he said, and poured the wine directly over my head in front of everyone. Simone's laughter followed instantly. At least now you look like a real server. The room went utterly silent. I sat there, wine dripping down my collar, the envelope soaked through against my chest, and felt something inside me go completely, permanently still. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand and shout. I simply wiped my face with a cloth napkin, stood slowly, and walked out of that ballroom, past 250 guests who had just watched my own son humiliate me in the exact spotlight I had built for him. Burton followed me to the parking lot without a word, and together we sat in my car while I finally opened the wine-soaked envelope and looked at the signature line I had not yet used. I wish this had gone differently. I wish my son had grown into a man who understood that the spotlight he stood in that night was built by 2 people's hands, not one carefully edited timeline. But wishes do not undo 3 years of a narrative constructed specifically to make his father disappear. The truth does. I called Burton's office the next morning and asked him to pull every legal document related to the company's ownership structure, board bylaws, and my own remaining authority as founder and majority trustee. I had never signed that transfer. I never would now. Instead, I asked Burton to begin quietly documenting exactly how deep Simone's rewriting of company history had gone, and exactly how much of it had already reached investors, city officials, and the board itself. 3 nights after the gala, I sat alone in my study with Opal's photograph on the desk, reviewing everything Burton had gathered. The falsified timeline, the erased photographs, the specific claim made to investor Gerald Harrington that Conrad had built the company from nothing in 10 years. A statement that, if repeated publicly again, could constitute securities fraud, given how many investment decisions had been made based on that fabricated history. Just before midnight, I signed a formal notice instead of the ownership transfer, invoking my rights as majority trustee to call an emergency board meeting regarding material misrepresentation of company history to investors and the public. 12:03 in the morning. I am 68 years old. I am, for the first time since that ballroom, no longer the father deciding whether to give away everything I built to a son who had already decided I did not belong in his story. Across the city, Conrad and Simone were almost certainly still confident the gala had gone exactly as planned, believing my humiliation and silence meant compliance, with no idea The emergency board meeting, already scheduled for that week, would force every falsified milestone into the same light that had once erased me from every photograph. At the emergency board meeting, Burton presented the full timeline discrepancy alongside sworn statements from 3 former project managers confirming the actual founding date and milestones. Gerald Harrington, the Boston investor Simone had personally courted, sat in that room, hearing for the first time that the man he had congratulated as loyal staff was in fact the founder whose real history had been deliberately concealed from him before he invested. The board, citing material misrepresentation to investors, voted to remove Conrad from his position as CEO pending a full independent review, with Simone's communications department placed under direct oversight for the same reason Conrad called me that same evening, his voice carrying none of the confidence from the gala stage, asking how I could do this to my own son. I told him plainly that a son who erases his mother's memory and pours wine over his father's head in front of 250 people had already answered that question himself, long before I ever needed to. He looked at me the way he always had, expecting the quiet founder who would eventually forgive anything for the sake of family. I was not that man anymore, and I had not been since the moment that wine hit my collar. Opal used to say, "A real man does not need clothes to speak for him." I always thought that meant simply staying humble. I understand now she meant something larger, that the truth of what you have built speaks clearly enough on its own, without ever needing gold letters or curated timelines to prove it. Conrad remains removed from his position, pending the board's full review, and the falsified company history has since been corrected across every public record and investor filing. Burton now serves as interim CEO, while the board considers a permanent path forward. As for me, I still have Opal's photograph on my desk, and for the first time in years, her actual history sits proudly beside mine in every record the company keeps. I think of her every time I put on that navy blazer now, and I think, the people who try hardest to erase where something came from are usually the ones most afraid of what the truth would actually reveal. If you have ever watched someone rewrite your life's work right in front of you, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There is more where this came from.